Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for joining in for this episode. Today we'll be looking at 6 different houses inspired by 6 different types of wood. Let's get straight into it. Today in this video I decided to challenge myself with making 6 different styles of houses with the 6 different types of wood. I'll go through each build and explain what I did to achieve how it looks and share some tips and tricks along the way. I hope this can help and inspire you guys with your own creative builds. First off is oak wood. The first thing that came to mind was for the style of this build was ranch, so I just went with it. Here's the palette I used too. Establishing what blocks you want to use is practically essential when starting a project. It really helps me stay organized as well. There are 3 signature features of this type of house, with the first one being the roof shape. I went for a tall, balanced roof, and I tried to avoid having a flat surface, as that's something you usually find in a more modern build. The second feature is the trim around the edges of the roof. If you're working with multiple blocks and colors, coordinating sections with the block you use for the trim can help blend your build together. This adds a lot more depth too, which makes it easier on the eyes to look at. The third feature of this one are the awnings. We have a huge tall roof which leaves us with a lot of negative space to play with. If you want to fill up space, awnings and decorative blocks like the classic bit of grass and trapdoors can almost always do the trick. The second build we have today is birch. Let's get into it. Birch was difficult to choose a style for, I'm not gonna lie. Because it's such a light block though, I knew I wanted to have sort of a European villa kind of theme. I did struggle for design ideas, so I had to look at a few references of actual houses. References are great to use in general, and especially if you get stuck in a rut like I did. The first feature of this house is the tone I used. I knew using so many light blocks would be hard to look at and probably a bit ugly, so I chose to add some contrasting blocks, as you can see from the palette here. For more realistic builds, try to keep most of the project in the same tone, either warm or cold. Warm tones are colours like yellow, red, brown and orange, while cool tones can be blue, green and grey. Although I did use prismarine blocks for the pool in the back because I just felt it suited it better than the other colours I was working with. The second feature of this house is the roof. I used a lot of references for this one, and the common denominator is that there was an overhang, but besides that, the roof was relatively flat. In the back patio though, I had space to play with, so I added a few extra staircases to spice things up. Last but not least, instead of using a ton of awnings like in the last build, I went ham with adding balconies. I used staircases to give it depth to avoid it looking like random blocks jutting out of a wall. The several balconies is almost a necessity in my mind, as it helps differentiate this building as a villa instead of just a normal casual house. And this is the dark oak theme build. I knew I wanted to do something medieval fantasy with it. I had dwarves and Vikings in mind while I was planning it. The 3 features of this particular bad boy start off with the foundations. I got this look by starting off with a square base and just layering L-shaped foundations on top of it. The generic medieval style has the second story hanging over the first and is usually supported by wood or stone. I chose to keep the foundations as wood logs and the stone for things like the roof trim, just to keep the 2 separate and avoid having too much going on at once. The roof is one of the most defining assets of the build, so I made sure to exaggerate the hell out of it, hence why the roof is so tall and has quite a crazy colour palette going on. Lastly, I added signs and fences to add some more detail and more make it look like a realistic medieval build. They're supposed to look like supports and or beams that are holding the building up. Also, before I forget, here's a palette of what I used for this project. Next, we have the jungle themed build. This one, I decided to keep simple and small, but tried to keep as detailed as possible. I couldn't help but think of Ewoks and the forest they live in from Star Wars. They definitely helped inspire this build. The first feature of the jungle build are the platforms. I used 3 types of fences in this project, and each one had a different effect. I used the oak to act as a rope, as if it's holding up the platforms. I also used a spruce fence to make an appealing border around the stairs so it wasn't so easy to fall off. Instead of building solely around the trees, I built the tree houses into them. I wanted it to look like the tree was really supporting these houses, so I also went around and added some leaves and branches. For the roofs, I used circle shapes, as it's very similar to the form and contour of the treetops. I knew if I just built with squares or rectangles, it would jut out and look strange. This is the palette that I used for the jungle themed build. The spruce build. This one is definitely my favourite of all the projects I've done. I decided to build it in a steampunk style as well, which was really hard to plan out, to be honest. Getting into the specifics of this build though, as you can see, I did use a similar technique as the one I used in the medieval build. I repeatedly layered square and rectangle shapes on top of each other. The key to it is really just building up and out. Each time you make a new story, you should be expanding from the previous layer by at least 1 block. For the first feature, I want to mention just don't forget to accessorize. As you can see, I've added several things that jut out of my build, but they all suit the theme. The windmills, chimneys, and watermill all have to do with steampunk, and the clock was just a cute detail I wanted to add. You can add flowers to the terraces as well to make it seem more cottagey if that's what you're going for. Because this is so similar to the medieval build style, I steered away from any roof trims and making the roof itself excessively tall. They have a lot of similarities still, but the roof is one of the most defining features. More simple styled roofs suit the steampunk theme much better in my opinion. Last but not least, the acacia themed house. Now I'm not going to lie, I've always been a bit biased against using this block. When it was first released and I saw orange, my immediate first thoughts was, ew, how the hell am I going to use that? Suffice to say, I'm a changed person now, as I was pleasantly surprised with how I managed to turn this one out. Orange does not really exist in my build style, but I did think of a great theme I could use for it, which was more like a suburban British kind of household. Those houses are so friggin' cute, I just had to try and recreate one. So, the main features of this house. The first one is definitely the roof. The generic British cottage is quite basic, so I kept that in mind when building it. I used plain old cobblestone for realism, of course, and didn't add a trim or anything of the sort. I kept the roof equal and balanced, as all things should be. To add some flair, I stylized the bottom story roof terrace overhang thing by making it flatter and shorter. The roof at the back of the house has height to it and a different shape. It was hard for me to connect it, so I kinda just winged it and ended up with that. On the bright side, it looks quite unique. As I said before, the house is generally quite simple, so I also just tried to stick to as little colours as possible, and really only 3 to 4 types of blocks. The secondary roofs and chimney add a bit of zhuzh where things get a bit too plain. I suggest incorporating similar concepts in your builds if you're having a similar issue. Alrighty guys, so that brings the video to an end. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. I really do hope that the tips and tricks and the different builds I showed you today can really help improve your building skills and inspire future creative projects. If you like the houses you saw today, please let me know down below which one was your favourite. I'm genuinely curious. Besides that, that's about it for today, and I just want to say thank you again. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Dandy out.